right. It's July 5th, 2025, just gone 8 p.m. And we're about to dig in something really quite revealing today. We're going to be connecting the dots, basically, from post-war Japan all the way up to, well, the surprising implications of the Trump's tariffs. Yeah, and our guide for this deep dive is this fascinating recent Japanese audio recording. It gives a really unique perspective on this whole complex relationship. Our mission here isn't just, skimming the surface. We want to try and uncover the real strategic thinking behind these tariffs and what it all might mean for Japan's place in the world economy going forward.
Exactly. And what's compelling, I think, is how these trade policies we see today, they aren't just about the here and now, are they? They're actually deeply, deeply rooted in geopolitical decisions made decades ago. Understanding that history, that context, well, that's how you can really start to see the future shape of global power.
Okay, so to really get a handle on Trump's strategy, maybe we need to rewind a bit. Back to that pivotal moment, Japan's defeat in the Pacific War. Because what happened right after that temporary governance under the U.S. GHQ, it did more than just rebuild the country. It kind of secretly laid the groundwork for today's economic setup.
And that brings up a really big question, doesn't it? What if the U.S. hadn't stepped in to govern Japan back then? The source we looked at is pretty clear on this. It suggests Japan just wouldn't have hit its current level of economic success without that initial American push. Its whole path would have looked very different.
Right. And this next part, it sheds light on why America helped Japan's economy develop. It seems it wasn't purely altruistic, not just about helping out. You have to picture Japan as this vital breakwater, that's the term used, a strategic barrier,
Right.
set up really to counter the influence of the U.S.-Soviet Cold War and the Korean War, a buffer against the Eastern Bloc.
Yeah, and if you zoom out, think about the alternative. What if the Soviet Union had been the occupying power, not the U.S.? The source strongly indicates Japan wouldn't have grown nearly as much, and it wouldn't have rejoined the global economy nearly as fast. That one geopolitical choice fundamentally set Japan's economic course.
It's fascinating context, isn't it? And it leads us straight to that phrase people often link to Trump, that Japan has been, quote, pampered for maybe 30 or 40 years. Our source actually hints there might be, well, some truth to that idea given that unique post-war arrangement. So, okay, with that history in mind, how does it connect to trade today? What does it all mean now? Well, the numbers show a clear picture. Japan still leans heavily on the U.S. economically. Something like 20% of its exports go straight to the U.S. China's next, around 17–18%. That's a big chunk going to one place.
But flip that coin, look at it from the U.S. side. Japan isn't actually one of their main import sources, not at all. For the U.S., it's Mexico first, then Canada, then China. Japan is, well, further down that list, so you see the significant imbalance in the flow of trade.
Yeah, a real imbalance. And the source, it uses this analogy that honestly makes a lot of sense. It's like a child who keeps selling everything they make only to their parent. Sure, the child's doing well, making money, but for the parent, that constant buying, it isn't a healthy long-term economic relationship, is it? It just makes their own trade balance worse.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the core issue the U.S. is trying to tackle here.
Right. So shifting gears a bit, the source suggests Trump's goal isn't actually about hurting Japan. That's not the primary aim. It's framed more as an attempt to, quote, awaken Japan. That's a very different way of looking at it than just punishment through tariffs.
An awakening. Okay. And how would that work?
Well, here's the surprising part, the proposed solution. The idea is to actively encourage Japan to shift its export focus, move away from relying so much on the U.S. market. Instead, the suggestion is for Japan to look towards what the source calls third world countries. Think developing nations, places like Indonesia, India, various African nations. These are areas where China is already, very actively expanding its own economic footprint.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about trade figures then. That's a key point. The source really paints this as a bigger strategic geopolitical play. The U.S. essentially wants Japan to use its strong manufacturing base, its trading expertise, to basically counter China's growing economic influence in these developing parts of the world. It's about empowering Japan in a new strategic sense.
Absolutely. And that ties into another clear message coming through. If Japan does still want to sell heavily into the U.S. market, the expectation becomes, well, build your factories in the U.S., produce things domestically there. It's really about shifting towards more balanced strategic partnerships, not just a one-way street of Japanese exports to America.
Okay, let's imagine this actually happens, this vision. Japan starts reducing its trade dependence on the U.S. and focuses its economic power on these developing nations. Though the source does mention Japan would likely still buy things like military hardware from the U.S.
Right. And if you look at the big picture outcome here, the source suggests this could lead to a genuine coexistence, a co-prosperity for both Japan and the U.S. Japan would be operating more like a fully independent nation, making its own significant contributions to the global order, really standing on its own economic feet.
And this is where that term shock doctrine comes into play, isn't it?
Mm.
The Trump tariffs are being interpreted not just as trade policy, but as a kind of deliberate, drastic measure, a necessary jolt, maybe, to forcefully push Japan towards this new, more independent global position.
Exactly. And the source draws this really powerful parallel to history. After World War II, Japan lost its pre-war ambition, the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, that whole vision of a Japanese-led Asian bloc. This new economic strategy, if it works, could potentially allow Japan to lead a different kind of shared prosperity, a non-military one, purely in the economic sphere, transcending that past. So the source sees it as both a difficult challenge, a pinch, but also a huge chance for Japan's future direction.
Okay, so if this is the strategy, what about China? How do they fit into this picture? The source seems pretty direct on this. China would likely strongly oppose this, Japan becoming economically awakened and independently expanding its influence in Asia and developing regions. That directly challenges China's own expansionist goals, right?
Absolutely. It cuts right across their ambitions. And that brings us to a really critical point about Japan's overall place in the world. If Japan does become less reliant on the U.S., if it extends its economic reach independently, it becomes a much more direct counterweight to China. This makes Japan's role even more pivotal on the global stage. And the Trump tariffs, they're seen as this, well, unexpected but potent trigger for that whole shift.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening in? We've really gone deep today, haven't we? Exploring how these Trump tariffs might be much more than just dollars and cents, more than just trade deficits. Potentially, they're part of a profound geopolitical strategy, one aimed at fundamentally reshaping Japan's role in the world, nudging it towards a new kind of economic self-reliance.
Yeah, and here's something to really chew on as you think about this later. How might things truly change if Japan becomes more economically independent? If it's actively engaging in developing nations, using its manufacturing and trade strengths there, how does that really alter the delicate power balance between the US, China, and Japan itself? It's a really compelling question, I think, for understanding where global economics and alliances might be heading.